right, so welcome. I'm Kate Walker. Welcome to our next step workshop, adding non-traditional forms of therapy and stuff to an existing practice. Because adding to your practice shouldn't make it harder. It shouldn't weigh on you. It should add to it. So we're going to start the first 30 minutes with recording through my editing software. So if I do all of this right, we beta tested this with my virtual assistant, Jessica. She said she could hear everything. So we'll see how it goes. You never know with these things. And so I'm sharing a screen. And so what you should be seeing now is my editing software called Camtasia. And when I click play, you'll hear our first guest. This is Crystal Acosta, who hosts Through the Eyes of a Therapist.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for asking this question. Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting about my journey is that I had a podcast first, and then I opened my business after that. But the podcast did end up supplementing and helping my business afterward. So let me explain. I worked for 10 years in the nonprofit sector. And during that time, about maybe 6 years into that experience, I decided that I wanted to kind of spread the word about mental health awareness, mental illness, breaking down stigma, and just talking about my experience as a therapist. My podcast is called Through the Eyes of a Therapist. So I really wanted to talk about what it's like to be inside of a therapist's brain and broadcast that to the masses. And so my podcast has been around since 2018. My private practice was born in October of 2019. The podcast has really been helpful in a lot of ways, as far as firstly, putting my name out there, letting people know who I am, giving my face a voice, or even giving my name a voice. Because a lot of people might not know what a therapist would look like, right? Like, oh, I've heard of Crystal Acosta or Crystal Martinez Acosta or Crystal Martinez, but I don't know what she sounds like or what she's about or what she talks like. Is she old? Is she young? Does she know what she's talking about? What is she an expert in? And so I kind of wanted to just get my name out there as a person in the community who has a history of her own mental illness and knows what it's like to have gone through the ringer of seeking my own mental health services, but then also being a therapist and what it's like to provide therapy in the El Paso community.
This idea that you started as a voice, you wanted folks to, and I've appeared as a guest on your podcast twice, which is amazing because I love your mission, which is to destigmatize therapy. Like, what is your therapist thinking? What do they, I mean, you have things like, it's not as simple as like, do they eat or do they sleep? But really, it's like when a therapist makes a mistake or what happens when you say the wrong thing, and really humanizing the therapist. And that's where your podcast started, was wanting the therapist to be really accessible to your community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So that was definitely part of the voice that I wanted to create for my community, is that we are accessible, we're human too, and don't be scared. Let's break down that power dynamic and that power barrier. And just so that you can hear us talking just like humans.
I love that. If you're in a practice or starting a practice and you're like, hey, I think I want to add podcasting, give us kind of the pros and cons of podcasting when you're in private practice.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of pros to podcasting. Obviously, some of the ones that were already mentioned were like marketing, being able to get your name out there, networking, right? Asking people to be on your podcast that are in your community, or people in the region or in the area or in wider Texas, right? Like for me, being able to reach out to Kate and say, hi from El Paso,
Mhm.
hundreds of miles away. You want to be on my podcast? And being able to stretch your community out that way. I think that's a really huge advantage of podcasting. And then they share their episodes with their communities and their networks. So then your podcast reaches wider audiences. So I think it's a really good marketing tool, a good networking tool. Some of the cons, I think, are that it's really time consuming. So just be ready, because when you first start a podcast, there are a few things as far as startup that have to be considered. So one is time, right? You have to be able to set aside time to record these things, and the episodes. So considering how long do you want an episode to be? The average time span or attention span for a listener is like 22 minutes. So if you make like a really long episode, you better make it really darn interesting, or people are gonna like fall away and be like, okay, I'm done. So figuring out your content list as well. What are you going to talk about? Yeah. And as far as the schedule, right, the content calendar, how often are you going to release? What is feasible for you in your schedule? If you're going to be editing it yourself, be prepared to understand the ins and outs of the technical piece of that. I had to figure that out on my own because I didn't have any startup money. And I'm like number one DIY queen. Like, I will not pay for somebody to do something for me if I can figure it out. Like, so I would spend hours. So the rule of thumb is about every 30 minutes of audio is about an hour and a half to 2 hours of editing. But if you're already savvy in that area, where you know someone in your family friend circle that can do that, that's great. But I have since then started outsourcing that. But that costs money, right? So you have to think about, do I have money in my budget from my business?
So people think podcasts like blogs can be monetized, right? So you can make big money as a podcaster or something like that. How would one, like, well, how many thousands of downloads or millions of downloads or whatever? What's the money making aspect of a podcast? Because I know everybody's dying to know.
Sure. So it's really hit or miss out there. So there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out on the airwaves. Okay. So you have to think of, am I going to really make it big? This is like that Hollywood lights dream, sort of Broadway lights dream thing, right? So if you're going to make it as a podcast, it has to be really attention catching. There's kind of a science to it because there's algorithms and things like that. You have a certain amount of time in the first few episodes to catch the attention of like Apple and Apple Podcasts and things like that for it to hit big, and be able to monetize it in that way and get like hundreds of thousands of downloads and get advertising attention. So it has to be really well planned out. You have to have a good editor, good audio. Don't be recording like in your bathroom with like an echo with like traffic in the background, right? Like, people don't want crappy podcasts. People want really good podcasts, right? But one way that I am starting to monetize it now is through Patreon. So that's kind of like a crowdfunding source situation where you can ask people to like subscribe and give like $1 a month or $5 a month so that they can help with editing costs or maintenance costs and things like that.
So long and short, you can use a podcast as your like rocket ship to fame and fortune, or you can use it, what I hear you doing, which is a marketing tool. Like, here's my face on my website, click this button, and now you can hear how I teach. You can hear how I present content. You can hear how I, cover these topics. I mean, blogs are the same thing, right? It's just, you don't hear the person. You don't hear, like, you have this sense of humor that comes through on your podcast. I mean, you're funny. And I imagine a client hearing that podcast would really connect to you emotionally a lot faster than just reading blog after blog after blog.
Right. And I think the thing with blogs too is that it's really like contrived, right? Like, you can go back and edit and edit and edit and like erase and really think about what you're saying.
True.
With talking, You can hear inflection, you can hear tone. You can't really go back and unsay something unless you ask your editor to take it out, or you're editing it yourself and you're like, oh, wow, I really messed that up. I got to take that out, which is time consuming and costs money. So you have to kind of either be real with it or not.
Jean, tell us how you got the idea to add yoga.
Out of my own, I was thinking about this actually before we got on, out of my own transformation of what it did for me. I'm not the same therapist. I'm not the same person. I am actually in my body. And that just, translated into the work that I do. Like, I could not add that. It was just coming out of my mouth as my examples when I was talking to my clients, and it was just part of the whole transformation. And I just saw what it did for me. And then adding in yoga does kind of feel, like, okay, how do I do this? How do I help someone else be in their body? Like, that's, and for someone who's really struggled with being in my body, that's challenging, right?
So there's special training for this then, right?
Yeah. So you can do, yes, please don't do this. Because you can get caught in their dissociation. You can get caught. So there's really, yes. I think if psychotherapists have done a lot of their own yoga and they see the value, I think you can lead them into some simple things. Sure. But I think the more that you incorporate this, the more it would be really helpful to know about trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive yoga.
So when you first added it to your practice, what was that like? Just because I know you know me, we've done just the traditional practice. You had an office in the Woodlands, an office in Montrose. You were kind of killing it just in the traditional sit at a desk kind of therapy realm, right? So what was it like when you first kind of went out and trusted and started this in your practice?
Like I mentioned before, it was scary. Because I was trying to think of it in terms of like how when you first come out of grad school and like the basics of reflective listening and all of those things, but you're not quite sure when to use them and what, you don't have like the smoothness to that you do over the years, right? And that's kind of what it feels like when you're doing something new, right? It's like, does this feel like the client's going to go, that's weird, or just losing yourself in it because you're so wrapped up in trying to do the right thing rather than asking the right questions to help them feel it in themselves, right? And I think in talk therapy, we're so used to, oh, you feel angry. Well, I don't know that they may seem like they're angry. I don't know that. And so it's much more valuable to help them feel it in themselves. And that's the same way with yoga. It's like, what are you noticing when we're moving in this posture? What are you noticing? So we use that a lot now, of course, in our talk, but that's not a whole lot of what we were taught using in traditional talk therapy. It's interpretation, it's reflective listening, it's but not, using tools to be able to help the person identify it for themselves. And so yoga is very much like that.
So this isn't like you're not going back. You're not going back to just traditional therapy. I see it and I hear it in your voice. This is you feel like this is taking your client someplace that you couldn't get to with just talk.
And I couldn't get to in myself. So by doing somatic experience, but even like before that, doing yoga got me in my body. So when I could understand what was happening in my body, then, I've slowly learned how to kind of translate and help them with that. But now I will do that. I will also sometimes create a class for a client, music and all, right? Where we start with an intention and a breath work, and we'll go through some postures, and then we'll shavasana, and then they get to take that playlist home with them. And
so then that brings, business questions to my mind, and it brings other questions, because here's what I pictured as just the novice. Like, I'm coming to you and I come to your office and I look around, I'm like, oh, yoga mats. But that's not how you advertise. Like, you advertise as a yoga informed therapist. Like, this isn't something like where somebody's going to be surprised walking to your office that they're going to see a chair and a mat, or right. I mean, you've been very intentional about your marketing.
Yes. So I still do traditional talk therapy. Not everybody is interested in coming to do yoga, right? Now over time, that might change because I sell it so much, but there are people, right? And so I have an area in my office where you come in, it looks like a traditional talk therapist. Like, there's the chair, the couch, and the desk, and the phone, and the lamp, and all the things that you would see in a therapist's office, right? And that is space for where either my groups, but that is what that is. Okay, so they have that, they know that, it's reliable, it's very familiar. Then we go into another area, another room, where it is a yoga area. And we might do meditation in there. I might do some meditation with them. It's also where we might do some Reiki. So it's a different area. And then oftentimes we'll go outside and we'll do yoga and things outside as well. And there's a little patio for that, but the rest of it is just an open space. So there is this both and available.
And of course, getting down to the informed consent, right? So when you're asking a client to, hey, let's be counselor client together, right? Let's have this special relationship. What's in your informed consent so that they understand what to expect? Is it like, here are the things that you might get, here are the dangers, here are, right, all the things, or is it pretty traditional?
Yeah, mine, I mean, I do ask that they sign that they can do minimal exercise. Like, they have a doctor's that they can do minimal exercise.
So like a yoga waiver. I mean, you would have to sign that if you were walking into a yoga class.
Exactly. What I will put in is what you might expect.
Yeah.
You might expect to feel intense emotions that come up. You might feel that if you've been stretching, that you might be sore the rest of the day. So you might want to take a salt bath. And I mean, there is it's more of like a care form.
So I got to ask you though,
less.
Because you're a supervisor. Do you supervise this?
No one has asked me to do any sort of supervision in this area. I do see therapists who do this kind of work, and they come to see me to do this kind of work. But I don't have currently any interns. You look very excited.
I look very excited because I think one of the things, and actually the MFT board is putting something in language in their rules, and it's something to the effect of, when you're adding a modality, just get the proper training, to paraphrase, right? And so when I hear of someone doing a new modality who's also a supervisor, I'm like, oh, sweet. Now we have somebody who can actually help this person, this new supervisee, perhaps, who's interested, guide them, and not just in how to, right? Because you explained it's going to have to be trained, but also in the waivers and how to make sure that you're staying in line with the board rules, yada, yada, yada. I mean, all the things.
And that's the whole other thing is how, that's what, when we're adding in yoga, when we're adding in Pilates and body movement and somatic, Reiki, we're touching our clients now.
Exactly.
How does that change our mindset of what's safe, what isn't, what's consent, what's care, and moving away from being afraid of what we're like, don't do all these things, into yes. And how do we take care of our clients as we do this? Because just not doing it hasn't been enough.
Amanda, tell us, first of all, how did you get interested in doing walk talk therapy? Like, why? Why walk talk?
Yeah, so right now, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, we didn't really have an office to see people face to face. And as things started kind of calming down, vaccines were becoming more readily available. It became a way to see clients in person. And also, a lot of my clients are just like, I'm so cooped up. Like, I used to go to the gym, I had all this energy, and like, I don't know what to do with that now. So it's like, yeah, why don't we merge it together and do this walk and talk? That way we can get out there, you can stretch your legs, get some of that extra energy out. And then we're also just in nature. So it's just a really good way to be grounded.
Okay, this isn't what you learned in grad school, right? So Tell me a little bit about the transition from, okay, you have to just reflect, you can't ask any questions, and this skill, wherever you graduated from, compared to the skill of walk talk. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so I graduated from the University of Houston, Clear Lake in 2020. So right at the end of December, and it's definitely like a huge change to go from like only reflect and make these statements, use all these like counselor skills, but don't ask questions, don't do any of this. Be careful with confidentiality. And so that is something that, of course, we're always mindful of, and we let our clients know, just, hey, so we're going to go out, we're going to do a walk and talk, but we do have to be mindful that somebody I know may see me. And if they know I'm a counselor, they might know you're a client or assume that you're a client, or somebody that you know might see you. And maybe they're going to come up and talk to you or whatever. So we have to know how we're going to handle that going in. If somebody knows me, of course, I don't react. But if somebody knows my client, which that hasn't happened yet, or if it has, they haven't said anything to me. But I have seen somebody that I've known while out on a walk, but they didn't see me. I try to choose parks that are not super crowded. We're going to a place that has a walking trail, and there's not going to be people like right up on us. And if we notice that somebody's coming, we'll kind of just like quiet the conversation.
Talk a little bit about the beautiful parts of this, the art of the walk talk.
Yeah, so I'm also a registered yoga teacher. And for me, like just taking my clients out there and getting them some sunshine, that vitamin D, that's really, really good for them. And a lot of them just feel so peaceful afterwards. And just being able to just look around. I love parks that have ponds or like something like that there. And, we like to do the 5 senses grounding technique. So, what's the furthest thing that you can hear? What can you hear right now? Okay, now let's wait a little bit longer. And what's the furthest thing you hear? What are you smelling? What are you seeing? And so that's just like really special to be able to use with the client when we're out in nature, because they can look around and just really listen.
So you had some special training before as a yoga teacher, but what has this meant for your supervision journey? And how has it helped or added to your practice of walk talk?
Yeah, so I actually just got my yoga training pretty recently, because I was noticing that my clients, it's really all about, the body too. And when we're working with anxiety or just anything where we need to regulate our emotions, it helps if we know where those emotions are coming from, where we're feeling them, and how we're processing them. So it's helpful to have a supervisor that I can go and talk to, and she's very open about like different sorts of ways to do therapy and different ways to be creative about therapy. So it's super helpful to have that, as opposed to someone that is like, no, because you may be seen or you may be spotted, so just don't do it, stay away from it. Because I think we're starting to learn that therapy can look like a lot of different things for different people. And some people, especially if they have extra energy from anxiety, or maybe they have really bad ADHD, just like walking really, really helps.
Talk about the paperwork a bit. I know Jessica has sent me a couple of things that we can share with folks who are going to be watching this. But for you, what's important as you're having your client fill out the informed consent?
So the most important thing, again, is reminding them about confidentiality, what that may look like, how do we want to handle the situation if we see somebody, and safety. I want to make sure that we're going to well-lit parks. We're not going like really late at night or like really early whenever it's just, there's not enough people around for safety reasons. So picking an open park, and I let them know, hey, I'm going to try to choose a park, but that's open and has all these features, but if you know of anything, let me know too, because let's do that. I do try to make sure that I meet my client in person or virtually first before we do the walk and talk, just so that way I can get a feel. Yeah. Definitely want to get a feel for them and know like what I'm getting myself into, first of all. But it is important for us to just even know what both of us look like. So that way my client's not walking up to a random person. Are you my counselor? So
Hey, it's Kate Walker, and I'm going to talk with someone who has actually participated in walk talk therapy. And he is going to give us his perspective as the walker talker. And his mom, Lisa, is going to talk to us about what it was like to be the mom of the walker talker. So, Hayden Dornick, you're going to tell us a little bit about walk talk therapy. Tell me, what did you like about it?
Oh, well, I like that we walked around the lake and it was very calming, the water.
Nice. Was there anything special about it that was, so let me say this in a different way. Was it a lot different than sitting in a room with a counselor?
Yeah, it was calming walking around the outside surrounded by trees and a lake and benches on the way around.
So did you ever stop?
We did sometimes to sit down sometimes to talk about something a couple of times. We usually talk while we were walking, but we did stop a couple of times. And also we stopped on the bridge to see the turtles.
Nice. Well, okay. So was there anything that you hated about it?
No. I think every part of it was actually very calming and nice.
Very calming and nice. I like that. You've said calming a few times, and that's one of the things that I would suspect that it is, being outside. Did you ever worry that somebody would like come walking up the path and be like, hey, Hayden, what's going on?
No, and if it did, it wouldn't bother me.
Nice.
Unless it's someone I don't like, and then it would.
Yeah, same. Hate talking to people I don't like.
Right? Yeah. Right? Yeah, I don't like talking to people I don't like.
All right, Lisa, as the mom, how did the counselor approach you? Like, did you know what you were getting into, or was it something new?
I did. I actually picked her specifically because she advertised that she did the walk talk therapy. And knowing Hayden, he's ADD as well. And so he's already moving a lot.
Yeah,
not fidgety, but just his body moves.
Yeah,
as a typical ADHD kid.
Yeah. But on the experience, mom wasn't there.
No, but
it was fine. She was out on the deck just reading a book, and
it was a nice setup. I will say that.
Yeah.
But so the therapist, the first couple of sessions, we didn't do it. One, just to get to know each other, and then though I think the weather was it was in December. No, it was January, February, so it was a little cool out.
Yeah, but then when we did it, it was very nice.
It was really nice. So she would, she asked me if it was okay, because I don't go. You know, he was.
Yeah, I think that's
13, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I love you, but I like that you weren't there.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. So she asked, for consent. I may have had to sign a paper. I don't remember. It could have been in the paperwork. But her office overlooks this nice little lake that has a path around it. So it was just a circle, and I sat out on the deck and I could see them for the most part, I could see them. There was a section I couldn't, but
that was because there was a building and trees blocking blocking your view, but the other parts you could see.
Yeah, I could see, and
it was just the ending that building blocked you, so you couldn't see.
But I could tell in his demeanor, he was calm.
What's demeanor?
Like how you held yourself.
Yeah, I was calm. Yeah, it was
very relaxing, and it was natural.
Yeah,
and that's
I think it's really nice to be in a natural environment, and I like the lake.
Mm-hmm.
The therapist is going to have a lake behind their office building around it.
But that therapist was amazing with the walk and talk. I think the walk and talk was much better around the lake. If you tell your counselor that they should do it around a body of water, like a river or a lake or something.
So get yourself a lake.
Get a lake. That's number one. Everybody get a lake. Get a lake.
It can also be a river,
or a river.
Yeah, river would be good.
River would be good. But I could see how when they're walking around, you could just tell he was calmer.
Mm-hmm.
And just it was a conversation.
Yeah. Without further ado, we have Cindy Doyle back, and she is going to talk more in depth about the world of podcasting and adding podcasting to your practice, to one of the repertoire of your practice. And if you missed her talking about public speaking, I've had a couple of folks ask me in the chat, there will be replays available. You saw my editing software, so you give me a little bit of time to edit this stuff up, and I will get it done. So Cindy, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hello, I'm back. I'm now I'm on my podcasting stuff because I'm at home, and I figured this was better for sound quality. Hopefully,
that's your podcasting setup.
Yes.
Oh, that is so cool.
This can hang over, or it can be here. It's just that I figured you wanted to see my face.
I do.
And so when it's hanging over, it's like right in the middle of things. So yes.
All right. So what is the best piece of advice you could give anybody starting out thinking, yeah, I think I want to do a podcast?
Don't overthink it. That is really what I would say, is don't overthink it. Podcasting, if you are doing any kind of psychoeducation in the therapy room, which I know everybody is, basically it's psychoeducation with a microphone in front of you. And that is really what it is. The other aspect is networking and bringing guests on. I do a hybrid of it because I have messages and stories that I want to share with my audience. And then there's also the aspect of bringing in experts or other people that to talk about various topics, but don't overthink it. You don't have to buy big, expensive equipment. So my mic, which I think you can hear the sound quality of my mic, it's supposed to be like yay far apart, but usually my mic's pretty good. When people edit my podcast, they're like, your mic's so awesome. My mic and my little hangy, this thing right here, whatever it's called, I don't even know. I think I bought this for, I want to say it was like $150 on sale at Best Buy. And it came in a box, and you plug it into your computer and you are good to go. There is free software called Audacity out there that you can use to record. My headphones were off of Amazon. I have gone through there's a whole lot of equipment that you could buy that you just don't need. So don't overthink it. You could do it with your mic. You could use your earbuds and do it if you wanted to. Like, it is really not that hard. So don't overthink. Don't think like, oh, I need some fancy equipment. Don't get caught in the trap of spending a bunch of money. That would be my advice. The big one.
Well, tell us about your podcast, The Code for Couples, and what your aim is with that podcast.
So I chose podcasting because my audience, which could be officers or spouses. So Code for Couples is a podcast to impact the emotional and relational health of officers and couples, with the impact hopefully being connection and resilience. And so that's kind of my world that I stay in as far as podcasting. But I chose it because officers are in the car, spouses are driving kids around in the car or to work. They have alone time. They both have alone time and downtime. And many times they can throw on, some earbuds and go that direction. So that is the direction I went, as far as podcasting. And that's my audience.
And so I'm going to push you a little bit more. And I don't know if this is what, please feel free to throw stuff in the chat. I'm just going to kind of wing it based on things that I hear and what I'm curious about. So when you're trying to get guests, like how would you get a guest on your podcast? And I know you are often a guest on other people's podcasts too, right? So how do you
today? Yes.
We talked
for
about
an
that.
hour. So, okay, guests. So with guests, and I still reach out to guests. I have some guests that reach out to me, but I reach out to a lot of guests, and I stretch most of the time. So I just kind of say, hey, who is in my niche or who's in my niche that I would want to bring on? I also, one of my connections I feel is to bring my mental health community to my law enforcement first responder community, because I feel like there's a good overlap there that they can learn. So a lot of times I am reaching out to, like during COVID, one of my friends, Amy, has a practice dealing with kids, little ones. And so I said, hey, I'm getting a lot of questions about how COVID is impacting, like kids are having nightmares. And like, I'm hearing this, would you be able to come on? She's like, yeah. And we just start having a conversation. When in our community, there's been a lot of like talk about like, can you support various social movements? So like, do we have difficult conversations around like Black Lives Matters, and what does that look like? And bringing somebody in to talk about those various topics and have a conversation. So I go out and I reach out and I'm like, what's impacting my community right now? And what do they need to hear about? When trauma is always a big one, but there's a lot of people that talk about trauma. I try to keep things related to relationships and what can be related to a relationship. I've reached out to officers that were involved in a critical incident and their spouses. I met somebody talking to somebody in their DMs, right? And I said, hey, would you want to come in and talk? And she's like, sure. So she and her husband talked about a shooting that he was shot. So I reach out a lot and just say, hey, are you willing to come on? I also look towards experts that I know in the field that are in mental health or even outside of mental health in the other communities, people that have written books. I do that a lot. Like, who's written a book on this? And do they have something to say? Would they want to come on? People like to be able to market their stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've had somebody who was really cautious, and then she got to know me. And she's like, okay, you're not going to throw me under a bus. Yes, let's have a conversation. And so, there's that. Getting on podcasts, I have had people reach out to me. LinkedIn's a great one for that too. And also Instagram or Facebook, like people just find you and they're like, hey, come on my podcast. Or initially I've also spammed podcasts is what I call it. Like I found some podcasts. Sure. I reached out. It's that whole thing of like, I put a little pitch together and said, this is who I am. And would you want me to come on? And then once I start getting on podcasts, people started hearing about me and they're like, now we all want Cindy. So it's a great way to get your message across, whether it's sharing with your community or whether it's that you want to get out of the mental health world, right? And get into some other workplace or some other community to be heard.
So I know what my burning questions are, everybody. I'm going to give you guys a choice because Cindy and I have talked about this so much. And so there are content issues. There is pitching issues. There are how do you monetize it issue. I mean, where do you want me to take her?
There's tech issues.
Tech, right? So you tell me which direction do you guys want me to take it? Otherwise, Cindy, I'm going to leave it up to you.
Or does nobody want a podcast?
Nobody wants to podcast? Come on. Well, talk to me. I knew it.
How do you
There
monetize it? Good question.
I knew
Good
it.
question.
That was a
Good
trick
question.
I knew they were going to ask that. Okay, go.
So monetizing a podcast, what you do when you monetize a podcast is that first of all, you've got to get your podcast up and going before you're going to be able to monetize it. So the companies that are going to pay you for advertising. So monetizing it is all about advertising. So somebody asked yesterday, like, what's that little, like, they'll be talking and then they'll interrupt and say, oh, this is supported by Theranest or whatever it is. Right. And I said, oh yeah, that's an ad. Like, they're paying to have that ad. So advertisers want to know how many downloads you average, because that's the audience that they are turned on by. So I forget the formula right off of the top of my head. I think it's $100 per 1,000 downloads, I think is what the average is, what they're saying. So I haven't looked this week, but 2 weeks ago was at 102,000 downloads. So, and I've been going for a while, but you have to be consistent with that too.
Wait, say that again. You broke up a little bit.
I have 2 weeks ago, I got 102,000 downloads. Like, I'm up to over 100,000 downloads. And so what they're looking at is they're looking at weekly downloads, episode downloads, monthly downloads. So you've got to get going a little bit before you're going to start monetizing the podcast. But then once you do, a little ad, every little ad helps. I mean, you're not going to be, make thousands of, I guess you could if you were like Amy Porterfield or, did murder podcasts, or what's her name? The couples one.
We Can Do Hard Things.
No, the one who like talks about all of her couples in, I don't know, like Esther Perel. Like, if you're Esther Perel, she's like, that's like, oh yeah, let me listen to that. Like, voyeurism is what I kind of think of it as opposed to psychoeducation, but you can go that direction too. And so it's just a matter of getting things going. And then what you do is you establish what's called a pitch, and you say, hey, my audience uses your products. I'm happy to advertise for you. If you're interested, let me know. And you put a pitch together and you, once again, reach out. It's very much networking or cold calling and reaching out. Once you get known, then people start coming to you. I've actually not monetized my podcast because it's just a choice I made, because I feel like my audience appreciates it more. So that's just a direction I've gone. But my friend Rebecca, who also has a podcast, she's monetized it from the beginning because she already had a following as a part of her blog. So.
Well, and that's one of the things, if you came tonight looking to see how to monetize a blog, I don't have the expert for that. I was really hoping I could, but I'm getting her next week, June 16th. I'll get Jenny on here to talk about blogs and pitching and things like that. Not here, it'll be another thing, but you get the idea. But when you talk about, go ahead.
I was going to say the other aspect of that they also look at is your social media following. So how many followers do you have? How engaged are your followers? It doesn't mean that you have to have 10,000 followers, but are they engaged? Are they interacting with you? So the number of followers is not what matters. It's the engagement of your followers. So just wanted to mention that.
And so you'd have to pay attention to those insights on Instagram, or the likes and follows and all the things on
or
Facebook.
TikTok.
Yeah, I don't TikTok, but you.
I'm getting there.
Are
I think
you?
I'm going to make the leap. Yeah.
So I'm going to throw content out here again, because I think this is one of the things nobody's going to ask about it, right? But content and consistency, right? So if somebody wanted to monetize their podcast or their blog, and they're like, okay, they did the pitch got taken, okay, great, we're going to advertise with you. I mean, how do you stay consistent producing content?
So there's a couple different ways you can do that. And what I would recommend is that if you're going to podcast, I would really recommend that you do seasons, because then you can give yourself a break. It's something that I do not technically do, and I probably would benefit from it. Instead, I just go, I'm taking a break for a couple weeks. But if you do seasons, then what you can do is you can say, okay, a season is 12 episodes. And then you batch those 12 episodes. So you do 12 interviews or whatever it is.
Oh, well, what does
and
batch
that's your
mean?
season.
What is
okay,
what is a batch?
Batch. Okay. So when you're going to batch it, what you do is you say, I am going to, you pick a day or a time, like a chunk of time. So you know how when we were in school and people would say, you need to study 3 hours for every hours, and you block off those 3 hours or what it is, that's a batch. So you're batching. So I'm going to sit down and and I try to do this normally when I do my podcast recording, is I say, okay, I'm recording on these 2 or 3 days. And I try to do 4 or 5 episodes, maybe 6 in those 2 or 3 days. And that way I have 6 weeks, or if you're putting out every 2 weeks, you have 12 weeks worth of content. And you don't have to keep thinking about it week after week after week after week. It can build. You can say, hey, this month I want to focus on trauma. And so you do 4 trauma episodes or whatever it is. And so you can plan your content this way, and you can maximize your time. So you're not, that's the best way I can put batching. And so if you do a season, go ahead.
We have a question. Rita wants to know recommendations for editors, estimated initial investment.
So I know people that don't edit at all. They leave all their uhs and ems and whatever and craps and whatever swearing they happen to have in their podcast. And that is fine. You don't have to edit it. There's a lot of unedited podcasts. And if you're kind of flowing, a lot of times you don't have to. So you can not edit it and just put on, you can edit yourself. If you're tech savvy at all, if you just a little bit, or if you're teachable, I'll say it that way. If you are teachable, there's lots of YouTube that you can go on and start doing it. I initially edited all my podcasts. And so I had an intro done. So intro with the music. Now you can do it on your own and you can mix music in, but it doesn't flow as nicely as you can listen to my old ones and you could go, oh, but I'm not going to go back and re-edit them. That's my journey. Right. So as far as if you want to, and you can do all of that in Audacity if you want to, or if you want to get it edited. So my podcast editor does 150 an episode is what he does, which for me is really reasonable, because it's 1 hour in the therapy room, 3 hours swearing and trying to edit my podcast. So I'm going to pick the 1 hour in the therapy room and do that as opposed to my 3 hours. So part of it is I try to stay in my zone of genius, and zone of genius is not editing podcasts. So I'd rather do an extra session. So
well, I'm going to do a quick commercial here, because I know folks may have to jump off at the top of the hour.
Okay.
Speaking of zone of genius, how'd you like that segue? Cindy and I are putting on a Get Shit Done Day, and that's going to be held in Austin, Texas in April 2023. If you are interested in that at all, click the QR code, take a picture of it, and it's just going to hold your spot. No obligation. We'll just send you more information.
And it's more than a day.
Oh, yeah. It's more than a day.
It's a conference.
It's a Get Shit Done days. Yeah, we're going to be spending the night. It's going to be lots and lots of content, lots and lots of information. Also, if you are interested in courses on June 7th, our next step workshops. Last one will be about putting courses online and all the ins and outs of how that goes. So if you're interested and you haven't signed up for that, that's June 7th. I think it's at 7:00. So click the QR code for that. All right, back to Cindy. So what are questions? Y'all, come on.
I think the other initial investment, somebody said the question was like initial investment, right?
Mhm.
So the other initial investment is going to be any kind of equipment that you're going to use. So that's kind of it. It's really, you can do it really low budget. You really can. And that's what I did. I was like very low budget initially. And it's only as I started to have income from Code Forward that I reinvested it and tried to like use my time differently and hire people that could actually do it. You can get on, is everybody familiar? I don't know if everybody's familiar with like Fiverr and
I'm going to put that in
what's
the
the
chat.
other one? Fiverr and
Upwork.
Mm-hmm. Upwork. I personally like Fiverr for things over Upwork. Fiverr, I can go on and I can say, hey, I need an intro, and you tell them what to do. They'll give you an intro and it's $20 and
Book
you use it
covers
forever.
too.
Say that again.
Book covers, like artwork for your book.
Oh, okay.
Cover.
Yes. And then there's Audio Jungle, where you can get it's called ambient music, and you need to get royalty-free music. You cannot like put on your favorite song off the radio or you will get fined. So don't do that. But you can go on to, I think it's called Audio Jungle. Yeah, pretty sure there's other ones that you can look, but that's the one I use. And you can find ambient music to use as your intro, outro, those kinds of things.
Awesome. All right, guys, I want to be respectful of your time and Cindy's time. So thank you all for joining. Cindy, will you hang out for a few minutes in case people have questions? Excellent. And otherwise, I'm going to hit pause on the recording. So if you have questions, they will be recorded. And this is a safe space. So thank you guys for joining. I hope to see you on the 7th when we talk about courses, adding online courses, because we're working smarter, not harder.